Well, we'll wait a few more minutes before we get started.
That's why about Pokemon Go instead of Pokemon Go. That's why I look all these. Identity. That's what you.
One of my friends today put on his Facebook, how long should you wait before you start a Zoom meeting if nobody shows up?
Chris, you've made me a little paranoid. I'm kind of going around picking up some things around the kitchen a little bit. I never think anybody's looking on the background, but you are. I'm going to start blurring it like the smart people.
No, it's the opposite. I was saying it looks good. You need to make it sharper. You even got the bananas in the corner. It looks like a still life photograph.
Wow. Okay.
The piece on the stove, is that?
Oh yeah, now I'm blurring it for sure.
Yeah.
Chris is too good at this.
I'll entertain you for a second.
There we go.
That's the woodworking shop.
Yeah, this is my alternate office. So what's the book about, Chris?
North Carolina politics, roughly. It's called Anatomy of a Purple State. Yeah, that's the deal. It's for a University Press book price, relatively okay. It's like $22 for the paperback. No one should ever buy the hardback. And they told me the other day they're going to do a audiobook version of it, which surprised me. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh wow, good.
There'll be a couple times where I don't know how they're going to say like see figure 1, but that's all right. That's for them to figure out.
Chris, we might try to get you to Burke County. My good friend has a local bookstore here.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to.
Yeah,
be
so I might talk to her about that. Yeah,
Great, thank you.
be fine.
Yeah, there's a little bit of election administration stuff in there, kind of a history of some of the early vote efforts, which actually started in the early 1900s, which I had not realized in North Carolina. It's actually a little bit of stuff relevant to this work of this committee.
Well, it's 5 after 4, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank everybody for taking time out to attend today. I did hear from Andy. He will not be joining us, but he said he's going to get a rough draft out about redistricting reform proposals. And as soon as I get that, I guess I'll share it with everybody and we'll go from there. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to look at the agenda. We were going to talk about redistricting first. Does anybody have any comments besides, I know Andy was going to kind of take the lead in that.
Just that I think I don't know what folks would think about this. I mean, there's the possibility of saying we recommend this solution, like Andy has a ready-made solution, but I wonder, and maybe this is a good Jennifer question, if we said in general, we think something needs to be done. And, sort of not pretending that we know what the perfect solution is. Here's some options, Andy's solution being one of them. I know Andy's more circumspect about independent redistricting commissions that other people might not be. But I wonder if we might want to say, like, if the commission's recommendation is something needs to be done, there needs to be more study on it rather than, and here's our solution.
I think that's a great option. It also avoids the necessity of the committee voting on which solution they want. To say, here's a basket of options. Here's the problem we see now, right? Lines keep changing every year. Voters are confused. It's back and forth, whatever you want to say, it's not perfect. And then give your basket of 2 or 3 options and say other states have done, this and they've had, this kind of success or whatever. And here's some things we'd recommend, that our state take a good look at. I mean, I think that's, perfectly fine. Maybe 2 options or 3 or I mean, there really is no perfect solution, right? We're just trying to get kind of close.
I don't think you'll ever get a solution to it.
Yeah, but it would be better. There's got to be something better than having it back and forth like a football, it's. I mean, I know it's one of those things, like if you talk to voters, that they're very frustrated. What was the biggest thing they found as an obstacle to voting? Knowing where their, precinct is and which district they're in. That was like one of the biggest challenges. And that right there shows that, districts are an issue. So is growth. Can't do much about that. But I think Caroline and I got the same wear orange memo. And Myron's got orange on too, I think.
It's actually red, but we can call it orange for the purpose of consistency.
Close enough.
So we'll get our ideas and how do we want to share the solutions that we think to redistricting? Should we just through emails or at the next meeting before? We'll have one more meeting before a meeting in July, if I'm looking at everything correctly, or in-person meeting.
Yeah, and
Chris,
you can do some things by email. Certainly when there's a draft of the report, you can send around and get people, you could do a Google Doc and get people to comment. If there's 2 or 3 options, just make sure everybody's okay and nobody is violently opposed to any of the options, the recommendations.
And first, I mean, I want to figure out, does everybody really think that that our current system is a problem? I mean, I do, but I don't know that everybody else does. Sounds like Jennifer does and Andy does. Andy's on the record saying it's a problem, but I don't know about the rest of everybody.
Thank you for asking.
I think it's problematic.
I think it's a problem. Yeah, huge problem. I wonder, yeah. Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, Brad.
Oh, well, I mean, I think most of us are here because we believe that, right? So a little bit of confirmation bias. But this is probably a group that I would think would agree on that.
Kitty, I wonder if we could just kind of brainstorm now a little bit about, 2 or 3, possible options. Is that an easy thing to do, or is that too complicated and time consuming?
I don't think it's too complicated right now. If people want to throw their ideas out, and then we'll just share.
Go meteor. Wait, thunder.
I didn't hear what was said.
Scott, are you unmuting because you wanted to say something?
No, I've been unmuted,
Oh.
just so I can chime in whenever, but,
Okay.
no, I don't have anything to add. I'm interested in hearing your conversation about the merits of different approaches.
Cool.
I mean, so I mean, it seems like, I mean, just sort of, Andy's solution, right, is one of them, which is less about a commission. I mean, I think what I like about Andy's idea is that I think it's more politically palatable. Like, what legislator is going to agree to get rid of power? Like, I get the problem. I'm not sure that the Stevenson ruling, right, says the counties have to be clustered together. I'm a little more circumspect than Andy is that's like kryptonite to gerrymandering. And so I don't, so I think Andy's idea should be one of them. I mean, it seems to me there's pretty good evidence from the last round of redistricting that independent redistricting commissions can work. Not that they all do work. Some of them are terrible, right? If you give the legislature the right to appoint, that's not really an independent redistricting commission, but like the California model, the Iowa model, I think are both good models that evidence shows work, and fight back Democrats doing some bad stuff and Republicans. So I mean, to me, there's two options right there. One, sort of Andy's ideas, which I think are good and worth talking about, and maybe more implementable, frankly. And then there's the idea of an independent redistricting commission, which I personally like more, but I also think is less likely to actually be implemented in in the world in which we live. I mean, those are both options.
And in your resource list, you can point to those two states you just named where it seems to work well. You know, give links to those so they can get an idea of what it might look like.
Chris or Jennifer, can one of you, this is, I think everybody else in this call will know it, but can you all kind of summarize briefly what Andy's proposing and what's been done in our state ever to try to fix this problem and whether it has ever worked or not? If we maybe worked and then it came down, I mean, can we do, is that hard to do? I somehow think y'all can do that.
Go for it, Prof.
Yeah, I don't know how good of a job I'll do, and I think lots of other folks too. I know Brad thought about this a lot, Myron's thought about it a lot too. So I guess what's been done in the past. So the biggest thing I think to know that we do that's different is our state Senate and our state House. We apply this county clustering rule, which I do think is better, which says that we create a base map first, which then says these counties need to hang together because of population. And then and then you draw lines within them. And so there's certain parts of the map that are locked in ahead of time. So for example, I live in House District 119, and the state legislature had no control. The General Assembly, the Transylvania, Jackson, and Swain counties had the perfect population to fit in to this current map before they touch it. So that's one thing we've done. That was a state Supreme Court ruling that was important. We actually had, believe it or not, an independent redistricting commission proposal in 1956 in North Carolina, believe it or not, that never made it out of the General Assembly. So people have been talking about this for a long time. There was also a proposal to give it to the Secretary of State and take it away from the General Assembly in the 50s. So those are different things we've done. We've also moved from, we used to have multi-member districts in North Carolina for some places, and now everything is a single member district. And so that's been a change. So in answer to the second part of your question, what have we done? I think we've done all of that. Andy's proposal is essentially to lean into the county clustering idea more. In his words, I've got his link up now and I'll put it in the chat. He says, quote, "It is time to formalize the Stevenson process and the state constitution." And so he's saying that county clustering thing, which does do some good, there's no doubt about it, he thinks we need to lean into that more. The critique of that, which doesn't mean that he's wrong at all, but the critique of that is you can still do whatever you want within populous counties. So for example, Buncombe County is not big enough to be its own cluster of just one district. So you have to have 3 districts in Buncombe. How you slice the pie in Buncombe is up to the General Assembly. And so in this last round of redistricting, Lindsey Prather, who is a Democrat, it used to be, or it's currently 3 Democrats and 3 Democratic seats, frankly. And they said, hey, let's pack the Democrats into Caleb Rudow's seat, which is going to be Brian Turner's seat, and let's pack it into Brad, help me out. All of a sudden, I can't think. Oh, Eric Ager's seat, and then let's move Lindsey's seat and make it slightly more Republican. And they're allowed to do that despite the Stevenson ruling, right? So it's like it does I think a really good job in some of the rural counties, but within the urban counties, you can still slice and dice. Mecklenburg, Guilford, Wake, Orange, to some degree, New Hanover. So that's Andy's proposal, I think.
Well, and he
general.
also has a couple other things, like not taking incumbent residences into account, not taking politics into account, like you can't use, registrations when you're looking at.
That's right.
So there are a couple other things that seems to make it more objective and just looking at sort of contiguous areas that make it easier for a representative to actually get out and visit, the constituents. I mean, that's, the thinking behind that. So
The thing that, and I'm, I think I probably lean more towards Andy's proposal just because of the feasibility of it.
Totally.
But I'm trying to understand how, when they talk about not using that political data or that demographic data, how do they enforce that from saying they're not using it, but then working their way backwards? Does that make, like, I'm just trying to figure out how that actually works in practicality.
Yeah, if they have concept maps, let's say for the sake of argument, that
Right. Theoretically.
I agree. So I think it's best to say you can't use partisan data, but the reality is if you get on Dave's redistricting app and you go home and you look at your district, that information doesn't poof leave your brain when you walk in and draw those lines. I totally agree with you. I thought they did a better job on the first round of redistricting this last time, when they were at least drawing them on the computers in the General Assembly. It's not perfect. Concept maps, right, are a good example. But to me, that was better than allowing them to use it. And there's the idea that today you don't need to look at voting data to drive down West Asheville, get the smell of reefer, and figure these people are voting Democrat, right?
Right. We've self-sorted to a degree as well. I mean, not to a degree.
But
entirely.
the difference is if you don't live somewhere, you don't know neighborhood to neighborhood, because there are still Republican areas of Mecklenburg County, right? So even though, yeah, we have self-sorted, I guess the idea is that if you get somebody who's not from that area, doesn't know what, down to the street level, that it might be more fair. So, or get somebody young.
Goodbye.
I'm going to put in chat, I'll save it. There's a journal article, which I would normally not bring up because they're too wonky, but somebody who's on the California Independent Redistricting Commission wrote kind of her experience on there. And I find it really helpful to think this through. And I totally agree with Brad that in terms of realistic, it's probably not.
But it's not a bad guideline to have. Right?
Yeah.
Not a bad guideline.
It's a great start. And maybe that's not necessarily in practice, but something to codify for future court cases. I'm not entirely sure what the goal is there, or creating some accountability on the back end rather on the front end. But I want that to be the case. That would be, I think, a better way and the easiest way forward, again, for feasibility's sake. But I just don't know how it works in practice yet.
Maybe you get people on the independent commission who are from, Oregon or Wyoming.
California, I'll come and do it.
Our General Assembly might have a few objections to certain states being selected for that. I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and
So, one thing that from my experience at 3 cycles of redistricting is it doesn't really matter so much what the process is if at the end the decision makers have to explain and justify what it is that they did, and not take for granted that that their work is not subject to question, but to have a public hearing, a public presentation, a public justification for why things are the way they are, why they made the choices that they made, which allows discussions of race and partisanship, to be part of a discussion or to be a question, but mostly getting people to be transparent and explain the rationale for why they did what they did. And I think in the last meeting I advocated, or is in the one where we talked about redistricting, I advocated for transparency being sort of the transcendent principle that should be sought after in redistricting, regardless how the process plays out.
And wouldn't that be a change? Because didn't this time around, they didn't have to do things in public? Right? They didn't have to explain it. Wasn't it all, I mean, before the court was able to ask for the record of the meetings and this time they weren't. Isn't that true? Chris, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they changed it, so yeah, I know Myron's heard about that a bunch too, that they,
And
yeah,
Myron,
they
yeah.
no longer have to.
Yeah.
So that would be another recommendation to be more transparent, maybe.
Well, they had more meetings the first round, so they had a meeting in every congressional district. And I actually did some content analysis of that, and I mean, the people were pretty clear on what they wanted, but there's nothing that says, kind of to Brad's point about like, what's the enforcement mechanism, right? You know.
Well, and if I could ask a question beyond that. But when we had the maps in 2019 that were devoid of politics, or political information or partisan data, that was kind of what we passed in that 2019 as a result of those court cases. I'm just trying to figure out that process a little bit more. I've either forgotten it or never retained what it was that made those maps so drastically different than what we have now. I mean, I know there's some scalpeling here and there, maybe neighborhood by neighborhood shaving here and there, but I'm just trying to figure out process wise how we could return to that to a little bit in a way that that would kind of match Andy's recommendations.
So the question is, how are the current maps different than the 20?
Well, the process that went into those
Got
maps, how more so process than output.
Does
Obviously,
Brad-
the output is different because we have different congressional numbers and everything. But we've had a set of maps that were scrubbed of that partisan data, non-political.
Right.
Anyways, sorry, kind of rambling on that, but I'm just trying to figure out, or at least remember what the big difference was in the process and how we could potentially reinstate that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the traditional redistricting criteria, right? So all the state scouts worked in, everybody applies the traditional redistricting criteria, which is, contiguity and population equality within tolerance, which is another one of Andy's suggestions, by the way, I really agree with, which is North Carolina says you have to be correct to the human. Most states have a much bigger up to maybe 5% deviance you can have deviation. And we have deviation state legislative level, but not at the congressional. And I totally agree with Andy that trying to nail it to the person just creates problems that don't need to be there. So anyway, but so we dropped all of that, everything other than the traditional redistricting criteria, we dropped in the second round. As I think to answer your question. So party, we said you can look at party. We said you can't look at race still though.
Right.
I'm trying to remember what else. And then we went from 14 hearings to 3 hearings, I believe. And then we made it so we got rid of the public records piece of it as well. Other than that, I think the process was the same.
Okay.
But Brad, you're saying that in 2019, the results were better. That's just a question. There's a question mark at the end of that.
Well, I don't know if it's better or at least acceptable to the courts. I I don't know. I wouldn't go as far to say better necessarily. It depends on the criteria you're looking at for that, I guess.
Oh, wait, are you talking the congressional lines or the?
Yeah, so when they had to redraw those maps, I guess it was for the I think it's 2019 that we're talking about with the court where they had to they talked about using politically neutral criteria and not using
2021, wasn't it?
2021.
2021,
Okay, so it was I guess you're right. Yeah.
the one that came out 7-7 for the
Ye-
congressional.
Well, but that was only because,
Right, there was one toss up or something. Yeah,
well, yeah, and the special masters.
right.
I mean, our
Yeah.
collective friend Bob Orr and his two collective friends for this maps, right? So that was 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there was the back and forth about whether the judicial branch could actually draw maps, or if they could just reject them and tell the legislature to draw them again.
Right. I mean, the 2019 redraws came after the Hoffler files, right, where we realized that there was a Republican operative drawing those maps from Texas. So that process, they had a special master right from the beginning in 2019. But like you're saying, Brad, there's so many maps. I'm trying to, like, I worked on 2 of those cases and I'm still like, which map is that again?
Yeah, I've put myself out on a limb here. I can't remember everything that I was trying to recall for this, embarrassingly.
Well, it sounded like the two options might be to tweak the guidelines for drawing and then to tweak who draws them.
Good way to think about it. And yeah, one's much more palatable than the other politically, but both are worth thinking. And then I also think, yeah, I guess the guidelines piece would fall in with the number per district. And that to me is low hanging fruit. Like, I don't think that's as politicized. Like, if we say we think the General Assembly shouldn't have the right to, I mean, it's DOA. But if we say change the number, change the tolerance for how many people per district, I don't think that reads as problematic to one party in the same way.
Well, whoever's drafting is going to have to capture that.
Mhm.
Any other
So-
comments?
Yes, one quick question. I may have missed this during my period of disconnection, but but are we going to specifically mention transparency, how there should be, or recommending that there be more public hearings like there had been, or is that going to be one of the options that we present, or is that part of the process at all, or part of what we'll recommend at all?
I guess that would be in the guidelines. That there be, more transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if the committee agrees that transparency adds to trust, then yeah, you might recommend there are more hearings. And I see you put in the chat that there were a lot fewer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
people don't like things done behind closed doors, right?
Yeah, not at all.
And people don't like it when it looks partisan either.
Right.
Any other comments? I hope everybody's taking notes like I am. After I take them, I can't even hardly read them. Well, next we'll move on to unaffiliated candidates. I think that's a hard one also to tackle along with the redistricting, but I did a little research about how unaffiliated candidates are growing in North Carolina. And from the first of the year to May 18th, the number of unaffiliated candidates has grown by 41,723. The Republicans have grown by 13,288, and the Democrats had a decline of 10,333. And I think that they're going to have to, the legislature is going to have to address this sooner or later, that people are getting dissatisfied with both political parties, and they're trying to make it as difficult as they can for people to get on the general election ballot. And as we had discussed in the past, to get on the ballot, you have to have 4% of the registered voters as of January the 1st. And so I just grabbed 3 counties. I grabbed Alamance. You would have to have 4,512 signatures. Beaufort County would need 1,356, and my county would need 756 voters. That is a big burden on candidates to try to get on a ballot. I know in my county, I had mentioned before, a candidate trying to get on had used the mail service, and he did not meet his goal, and he met it like 2 weeks afterwards, where the mail service was so slow. And I was reading in the Carolina Journal that RFK Jr. was trying to get the signatures to get on the ballot in North Carolina. And to be an unaffiliated candidate in North Carolina, he needed 83,188 signatures. So what he did, he had him form a new party, and he only had to have 13,865 votes, signatures. So that right there tells you that there's definitely a problem when to be a candidate. And I know we talked about the different solutions, and I don't think I've looked at different different states, how they do it. 13 states have closed primaries. 4 states have nonpartisan elections. And then the other 33 states allow some type of participation in the primary in one form or another. Some of them let you, if you're unaffiliated, you can choose which party. Some of them you can choose any party you want. It's to look at how different states address the problem, but I definitely feel like we need to address some way for unaffiliated candidates to get on the ballot. Because not only, as you can see, this isn't even 6 months, and the growth of the unaffiliated voter. And I think you're going to see more and more and more of that. The easiest solution is just let them have a party primary, but not call it a party primary. And do the same filing that other people do. You pay a filing fee, you have an election, whoever's the top vote getter, unaffiliated, on the November election. But there's got to be some way, and I know Caroline had mentioned someone who had tried to get on as an unaffiliated candidate and the problems that they had also. So I think that is something this committee does need to address. I think it's probably one of the most important things for people who want to serve. And if other counties are like Currituck County, it's hard to find people to even want to run for office anymore. It's become a dirty, dirty job now. And I don't remember all the specifics that you were talking about, Caroline, about elderly person who had tried to run.
Well, I told the details to one committee I'm on, but maybe it wasn't this one, but we actually have a good local newspaper, and they did lots of editorials on it. But a man who's a veterinarian here, he's probably 80 years old. He's currently on the school board. He had served 2 or 3 terms before that. He's unaffiliated. And all of a sudden in 2020, one of our legislators got a law change so that people running for the school board, if they have to, affiliate with a political party, or they have to get 4% signatures. And it's not just signatures, it's signatures, address. I mean, it's date of birth, tons of personal information. This guy has probably helped every nonprofit in the community. He's very well loved, got a great reputation, has two very smart daughters who live here, who know a ton of people, who basically stopped what they were doing, which is working full time, to get these signatures. And they got it. They got it. So it worked out. But our local newspaper did an editorial on it and basically said, here's the way that our legislatures have set up the law for Burke County. You're 18 years old, you graduate from high school, you decide you want to run for the school board, you're affiliated with Democrat or Republican Party, you pay $20, you get on the ballot, it's a done deal. Hey, you live with your parents, you don't have a job, you're playing video games downstairs in the basement. This was literally an editorial in our paper, and it was really well done. And then you got another guy who's a veterinarian, has helped every nonprofit in the community, very beloved member, and has to get 4% of the registered voters in Burke County to sign something to put him on the ballot. I mean, it's insanity. But it worked, but it was a ton of work, and we'll see if he can get elected. But
Make sure that op-ed is amended to your report.
Oh, holy moly, I didn't
Yeah, in
Yeah.
a similar vein of just the work it takes.
want it.
Chris, you helped me with this because you were quoted in this story. I saw the story when it was quoted, the one I just posted in the chat. I want to say this may be the first independent candidate to earn a right on the ballot in state history for Congress, for U.S. Congress.
Correct.
And that it just shouldn't be that hard. I believe her opponents, the Republicans, Richard Hudson, the incumbent. I can't remember who the Democrat is. So it's actually a race not too far from here, so. And then she's an Army veteran, which also, kind of connects up with our area as well. So I guess the question is there a way that, see, it seems to me that this is a situation where both parties have very little interest in making this happen. Except, as it was mentioned, it's going to be unavoidable. This veteran said, hey, a third of people in my area are unaffiliated. So that's partly the way she was able to raise those signatures. So what can we suggest that won't just be shut down by both parties, I guess, in terms of this?
Scott, do you have any ideas?
I wish. It's really tough. I mean, the way the system is. Anyway, yeah. I'm interested in hearing any ideas.
Yeah, this really touches one of my personal buttons because there are so many voters that are unaffiliated, and legislatures always stack the rules to favor candidates nominated by political parties because they're in control of what the voters get to choose from when it comes to November. How do you change that? Well, human nature is loath to give up power. Political parties are loath to give up power. So anything that directly attacks the power of the parties is going to be hard to sell. But arguing for parity with the process that the political candidates have to go through and coming up with a proposal. And I like the idea of, a nonpartisan primary as well, with the same kind of barriers or lack of barriers that unaffiliated candidates would have. I think is politically and ethically, morally, however you want to try to persuade people, it is probably the most effective way to change the status quo. But the status quo is very entrenched. The duopoly of the two parties finds both parties equally vociferously defending their turf. So playing to people's sense of fair play and equality and equity and everybody playing by the same rules is probably the best approach if you really want to move the needle on an issue like ballot access. Anyway, Jennifer asked me for my opinion, and there you got it, for better or for worse.
I wonder if there are any states that do have a more equitable way of getting on the ballot. Maybe not, completely equal, but better.
Definitely have
Well,
low-
I think the first way is to unpartisanize as many local offices as you can. County commissioners, county supervisors, whatever they are in North Carolina, school board members, the sheriff, the prosecutor, the county clerk, making as many of those unpartisan, meaning you can file for office without claiming a party affiliation, and the parties don't get to nominate candidates, I think is probably the biggest first step. But then when you get into the legislative contests at the state and federal level, it gets a little bit dicier. But I think the most compelling argument is don't make it any harder for an unaffiliated voter or unaffiliated candidate to run for office than a Republican or a Democrat. Otherwise, you're stacking the deck. So.
If I can jump in on that, it's a perfect layup or assist for the kind of point I wanted to make, which is we're moving in the opposite direction. And so one thing that I think is actually undercovered by the media is the so local bills in the North Carolina General Assembly, as most of y'all know, but if you don't, local bills don't go to the governor's desk for veto. So redistricting local bills, constitutional amendments don't go to his desk. So the General Assembly has been slowly moving local elections to partisan affairs from nonpartisan affairs, even over objection of local office holders who write letters to their local General Assembly member and say, don't do this, this is a terrible idea. Yet we're doing it over and over. So Henderson County just recently moved. There's a bill in the General Assembly right now to take everything in Rowan County, I believe, and move all those to partisan affairs. So all county commissions are already partisan, but school boards, mayors, city councils, they get to choose their own adventure. The General Assembly is smartly, from a partisan perspective, changing that. And so I think we're gonna get few. So right now you can run for Silva Town Board and be unaffiliated, and that's about to change in a whole lot of places in the state. And that could be something that we could weigh in on if people felt that way.
It might go over about like term limits.
Well, Kitty, it'd be interesting to tell from a small county perspective that you really, since the number of unaffiliated voters is growing and unaffiliated candidates, that you're really limiting the pool of people who want to run.
Well, you're limiting, and it's also a burden on the election board. These signatures come in on primary day by noon, and a lot of your smaller offices are one or two people in there. And then they have to verify these names. You're talking about very time consuming jobs that
Yeah.
um
We didn't even bring up the partisan aspect of electoral boards, which don't represent the large segment of unaffiliated voters. So that's another layer to this whole partisanization, I guess maybe is a word for this.
That might be under the election administration committee. I don't know.
it's just amazing to me the number of unaffiliated voters just in the last couple of months. I mean, it's just staggering, the people who are registering unaffiliated.
Well, you could do in your report similar, basket of options. You could just lay out, why is this an issue? Talk about small counties, talk about, give that op-ed for the school board candidate who was beloved, who could, had to, do everything to get on the ballot. Give some examples of why it's going the wrong direction, and then some options to how you could make it more representative of the growing number of unaffiliated voters.
And
that microwave, if you accept that for the 725.90, I can get you on the schedule.
Okay.
Scott, are you talking to us?
And work will be
Oh.
done.
Sorry, I have a contractor here. I thought I
Yeah,
muted
I'm like-
myself.
You're asking us to give you 725.
And I had a train of thought when I heard that, it just left me.
But
I
think
apologize so much. I thought I muted myself before
that's okay.
the guy wanted to get paid.
Good luck. So I'd recommend, giving some options of ways to make it easier on unaffiliated candidates and voters. And if you don't want to recommend specifically, y'all are going the wrong way, but you could, talk about things that would make it easier, more representative.
Any
Whoever's-
other, excuse me, any other comments?
Turns out that gives you the blind ability.
Well, we'll jump to the survey. We were supposed to be Carolyn and who else? I forgot. It was supposed to be about the monkey survey we were gonna see if we could get done.
Yeah, I think it went out. I'm pretty sure it went out. Yeah, Rachel, you wanna jump in there, Rachel? There you go.
Yeah, I don't have too much of a status update on it just because I can't see the results on the back end. But I do know that Sarah created the survey and I was able to distribute it. I believe it was around like 1,700 people that should have received it. Last I heard that there were 21 people who had completed it, but that was only a couple hours after it started going out. So I don't know anything more. I wish I had more answers for how it's going and what the results were. I don't know if something happened with Sarah and she wasn't able to make it to this call, but I'll put an email out to her and see if she can get me an update.
Did you put a timeline on it?
I believe that there was. Let me see. I think we just requested to have everyone submit their or fill out the survey a week after or up until a week after.
Yeah, you're not going to get many surveys after a week, after it's been out there a week.
Yeah, I also wanted to check in to see if we wanted to consider maybe sending it just like a gentle reminder. It is a pretty significant list though. So I may try sending it from our marketing module that we have through the Carter Center to see if maybe if it went to some people's spam folders, maybe that would bypass it. But could be a good way to send out a reminder.
Sounds good. Okay, any other comment on that?
Myron's been married 63 years? Wow. Is that right? No. Oh, they're having it with a couple, another couple married. Sorry. Myron doesn't look that old.
I was gonna say, he looks mighty good to be married 63 years.
Yeah, woo. No, they're sharing with another couple. That's their 63rd anniversary. So anyway, sorry, keep going.
Do we have any more comments on the survey? Also, we were supposed to discuss filing fees. I know we felt like there should be some type of uniformity about filing fees.
That was also part of the survey.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, how did we want to decide to pull all this information together? Chris or Jennifer?
Well, Andy's gonna have us some stuff right
Right.
on districting. I'm happy to take what Andy sends and then try to write a very draft with draft written all over it. Like, in general, we think this is a problem. There's a few potential solutions. Here's a few, and then circulate it to the group. Once Andy sends his piece.
The other thing to think about, we sent out an email. I think we'll send another one about getting the committee chairs and co-chairs together to talk about what is likely to be in your big ideas to be presented July 15th. The press is going to want to know, you know, what are the points that this commission has looked at that might be tweaked for North Carolina, right? What are some of the issues? And I think, you know, the unaffiliated one is an interesting one. You know, there's some that are very interesting. So we're trying to get together a meeting of chairs of committees sometime in the next couple weeks. So did that email go out, Rachel? It did.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, you got
July-
it. Yep.
June the 4th. Thank you.
Oh, good. You can come. So yeah, just to be thinking about that before June the 4th, like what are those, you know, the 3 big ideas that come? I think we just mentioned them all, right? Unaffiliated, redistricting, and what was the other one? Oh, well, unaffiliated redistricting. What was the third thing we talked about? Maybe those are the only two.
We mentioned the survey, but
Yeah.
in
Well,
the
maybe there,
filing
yeah,
day, yeah,
maybe there was 2 big ideas.
yeah.
But both of those are pretty juicy.
Well, if anybody has any suggestions or comments, they can get them to me or Chris or Jennifer, and then I'll get up with Chris and we'll try to come up with some type of report. He's the college professor. He ought to be able to do it real well.
I just
Any
thought
other any other comments or questions for today? I think everybody's having to leave us a little early. All right, then, will we have our meeting, our Zoom meeting for this committee in June or not, Rachel? We will.
Yes, let me just touch base and see. It's June 24th.
Right, okay.
Mhm.
All right, sounds good. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to bring before us?
If you can have a draft be circulating before June 24th, so that June 24th you can kind of discuss, that'd be great.
I hope to have something before June the 4th when we have our meeting
Awesome.
of the chairmans.
Great.
All right, if nothing else, we'll say good evening. Thank you very much.